barge came alongside, there was extraordinary excitement. There's a great deal of poverty down here in the deep south of Italy, but there is a warm... Then it was time to lunch on pasta, with a sauce of wild herbs, anchovies, pine kernels and raisins.
Very, very old mosaic of Our Lady as the...
She ended up spending 2 hours.
You've got everything, yes.
Mio marito ed io siamo molto felici di essere qui. Work that out.
Salute. Now could you translate?
My husband and I are very happy to be here.
It was to have been virtually a routine visit to the Vatican, a courtesy call on the Pope. But on the day it happened, it became known that Prince Charles had also wanted to attend Mass in the Pope's private chapel. There was a frightful fuss based on the Queen's potential embarrassment as head of the Church of England. So as the royal party processed slowly through the Sala Clementina on its way to the Pope's study, there were discernible tensions, particularly discernible on the part of the princess, who had earlier confessed herself apprehensive about this visit. She was extremely nervous, and understandably so. There is sometimes something a little chilling about Vatican pomp and protocol. But even Vatican protocol occasionally gets things wrong. The prelate in charge of the introductions, not as well briefed as he should have been, removed her title in a sentence.
What sto di fare there? He is the Prince of Wales with Lady Diana.
The prince produced a straight handshake, the princess a small curtsy. The audience which followed lasted half an hour, a little over what had been expected. Afterwards, there was the formal photograph session, the usual example of stars as victims, handling their self-consciousness as best they could. Things were more relaxed when it came to the gifts.
Very great. Very great for your gift.
These few
For this
photographs.
wonderful
And
picture.
we thought you might like the bead, the venerable bead,
Ah,
ecclesiastical
yes.
history
Yes, wonderful.
of England,
Yes, yes.
which you probably know very well already.
A great personality of the common church, of the universal church. We are venerating him still. And that is
The Pope's main present was a mosaic picture of the Virgin Mary.
You met perhaps in the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore. It's a very, very old picture, mosaic of Our Lady as the protectrice, as the salvation of Roman people, of the city of Some, this little medal.
Thank you so much. Very, very kind.
The princess, given a papal medal, characteristically couldn't resist opening the box straight away. Still, it went off reasonably well. The rows in Britain were not mentioned. It was accepted without discussion that the private mass was never really on the cards. Back in the Sala Clementina, a fine room dedicated to Pope Clement VIII, student priests and their teachers from the English and Scottish colleges in Rome gathered to meet the couple. They were somewhat in awe of the occasion and of the room itself. The procession returned from the Pope's study, just as ceremoniously, but with an obvious lightening of the atmosphere. There followed something unique in the experience of old hands here, a walkabout inside the Vatican. Suddenly everyone wanted to talk, and the princess was back on familiar ground. The applause at the end was prolonged, reverberating around these old walls. That afternoon, they went on a tour of the Vatican and St. Peter's, cleared of tourists and worshippers alike for the occasion. Michelangelo's Pietà was the first thing they saw. The second was the vastness of the largest church in Christendom. St. Peter the Apostle was martyred here 50 years after the coming of Christ and has been a place of worship here ever since. Next, specially added for this tour, the monument to the last of the Stuart family, final Catholic pretenders to the English throne, a little jog of memory for these modern royals. Then the tomb of St. Peter himself, in a way the focal point of an entire religion. It is heavily and deliberately ornate. Each piece of decoration seems to set out to impress its importance on the mind. They walked through the crypt, through the stone ranks of history. They saw the Stuart tomb and perhaps wondered about the animosities of long ago, and wondered too why they are still only just below the surface of modern life. Crypts are the sort of places that can engender such thoughts. They strike a small chill to the soul, which does no harm every now and again. But for all the splendors of the Vatican, an orange farm in Sicily was something of a relief the following day, where they met the Ciancio family, Mario, Valeria, and their 5 children. It was billed as a private lunch, but if you're the Prince and Princess of Wales, this is the way you go to a private lunch. Everyone milled about on the lawn, getting to know one another. The atmosphere was cheerful and mercifully relaxed. Signora Ciancio, not known for her silences, explained her pasta recipes. First, to work up an appetite, a walk through the olive trees to look how the new season's orange blossom is getting on. Signora Ciancio did most of the talking. The princess was in a dress and hat redolent of the 20s, very flapperish. They were both extremely relaxed after the tensions of their day at the Vatican. This was rather a good place to start forgetting about the whole episode. And the perfect place to be given some orange blossom. The princess thought it a beautiful scent, and didn't so much offer it to the prince as shove it up his nose. There were other gifts too, a coral bracelet for the princess, a Sicilian urn for the prince. Then it was time to lunch on pasta with a sauce of wild herbs, anchovies, pine kernels and raisins. Delicious. In Syracuse, on the east coast of Sicily, there is an enormous archaeological site with enough Greek and Roman remains to satisfy even the most ardent addict, which these two were fast becoming. The curiosity here is the ear of Dionysius. Legend says that this is the way he could hear even whispered bits of treason from the prisoners he kept in the quarry below. It was explained that the odd acoustics still work. Listening to this explanation, the prince put his hand on the scaffolding rail and, finding it dirty, wiped the said hand on his wife's back. There followed a series of private jokes on the subject and some small embarrassment on her part.
Thanks a lot.
Next door on this site is the Greek amphitheatre, built in the 5th century BC and the largest in the ancient world. It was a place to discover for yourself and stroke the sun-warmed stones, a place to people with long-dead audiences in your imagination. But all this clambering about is tiring. A seat in the circle seemed a good idea. The best crowds of the whole tour were in the little port of Trani on the southern Adriatic coast. Britannia lay offshore on a brilliant hot day, within sight of the great cathedral which stands magnificently at the water's edge. And all the bells of the town rang out. When the barge came alongside, there was extraordinary excitement. There's a great deal of poverty down here in the deep south of Italy, but there is a warmth and a friendliness sometimes lacking in the north. This was a real southern reception. The people were having a day out. And this was a day when the prince and princess couldn't put a foot wrong. The affection communicated itself to them, and they responded in kind. Everywhere there was applause, hands waved, arms were outstretched. The police, with no experience of this sort of thing, piled in and hoped for the best. And still the hands came out. Whatever structure the organizers had intended fell apart. It must be a rotten place to be an official down here, but a lovely place to be a member of such a crowd. At the end, it was a struggle to get the car away. Trani gave up its guests with clear reluctance. At Malfetta, nearby, the deaf and dumb school children were rehearsing their pieces. Here they mix the partially and totally deaf so that the children can try to help themselves.
Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been? I've been to London to visit Lady Di, but here she came to see me.
This kind of school is, of course, one of the princess's special interests. She was supposed to spend an hour here. She ended up spending 2 hours. And she inspired a rare awe in one little girl. The prince helped the other girls with their Lego, carrying on when they'd long lost interest. The children sang their version of It's a Long Way to Tipperary. In the flats around the school playground, the people crammed the balconies. The temperature was in the 90s and they'd been there for hours. The children below shared their excitement in the only way they could. The princess and prince moved very slowly along the line. You have to remember that Malfetta had never had royal visitors before and may wait a long time for the next ones. Eventually, they reached the little balcony for the display. It's difficult but essential to realize that these children cannot hear the music they're dancing to. princess began to tap out the tunes on the stone balcony. And by now, the balcony had become a stone piano. The smaller children dashed into a Neapolitan tarantella. Again, remember, they can't hear the music. The secret is their remarkable teacher. But then, it seems to me, they're remarkable children. A rather uncertain dawn off the Lido of Venice, and Britannia, without haste, moves towards the city that once called itself La Serenissima, the most serene. It is a unique place in the world, its empire long vanished, but still dreaming of glory and wealth, and managing to achieve both still, for its glory is in its buildings, its wealth the money it scoops from tourists, as the Venetians of old plundered the gorgeous East. Its charm is as effortless as it ever was. When people talk about being taken for a ride, they don't always mean by gondola. They're simply helpless before its style. Despite everything, it still seems a privilege to be here. So, as her Royal Marine Band played, Britannia made a slow pass in front of St. Mark's Square and the Doge's Palace. Intriguing, actually, to see how naturally the yacht fitted into this scene. Style again, I suppose. Naturally, it was to St. Mark's that the couple went first. They walked out onto the balcony and looked down on the tourists being shunted about below. The crowds, in fact, were not large. Venetians can be rather blasé about this sort of thing. But the visitors were anything but blasé about the traditional grand tour of the Grand Canal. They progressed in water taxis specially hired for the occasion. These are tricky waters for royal barges. The high point, as usual, was the Rialto Bridge, which has been drawing the shoppers as well as the tourists for nearly 400 years. Then out across the lagoon for lunch on the island of Torcello. Not everyone got there safely. This member of the Carabinieri fell off the back of the high-speed convoy. He was safely recovered, though a stomach pump may be required. His gun, however, will never be the same again. Last evening on board Britannia, the Prince and Princess were keen to talk about their impressions of this tour, of Italy and the Italians. The Princess, for the first time in public, spoke Italian.
Awful problem is trying to do it quickly in the space of time, but I think my wife would agree that it has been the most enjoyable and exciting visit that I can remember anyway. And particularly, I think the impression has been one of enormous warmth and friendliness on the part of so many Italians who've greeted us in the most incredibly affectionate, hearted way all over Italy. And that particularly is something which will remain, won't it, as a very happy memory for a long time. Have you got one thing that particularly?
Just how kind and wonderful the Italians have been to us. They've made us feel so much at home, and it's the most beautiful place.
I think Florence has been particularly impressive. And, well, because a lot of English people have been there for years and years. So that was particularly interesting from my point of view, considering my grandmother used to go there as a child, and so many of my forebears have been there. And I think the thing that stuck in my mind particularly were one or two things in particular, like the Botticelli paintings that we saw in the Uffizi. That, I don't remember having seen a Botticelli for real before, and that made a great impression on me, I found. You've got something to say, Lieutenant.
Mio marito ed io siamo molto felici di essere qui. Work that out.
Salute!
Now could you translate?
My husband and I are very happy to be here.
Thank you.
very much.
We can't thank the Italians and the Italian government enough for their immense hospitality and kindness, and for putting up with us for 2.5 weeks. It's been the greatest possible fun and experience, and we shall
hope to come
treasure
back
it.
soon.